I could pretty much just say what Jason said this morning and I could be done. He stole a whole lot of my thunder, so some of this is going to be reiteration, but hopefully I can reinforce some of it. I can maybe give a little different slant on things and maybe bring in some stuff that neither of the previous speakers have talked about. What I want to talk about, maybe not primarily, but certainly importantly, is the importance of rainfall records and to examine some of the historical patterns and how that can be used to help us predict drought. And to talk a little bit about maybe some changes in some of the patterns. Maybe not so much here, but what we're seeing is the western side of the Panhandle, we're getting away from what the historical patterns have been, and we're becoming more of eastern New Mexico. And I suspect that's going to move east over time. So that's one thing. Use that information to how you can use that to help you decide when are some critical points in the year, maybe orient your production cycles toward better matching forage availability, and to make more timely decisions with regard to drought. Discuss some factors to consider, what actions should be taken. I see a lot of times, always we do these presentations when we're in the middle of a drought. And that train left the station a long time ago, and all we're doing now is damage control. And what I want to talk a little bit about is A, how do we structure the business so that we're ready for drought? And then B, how do we decide what we need to do? And quite often I see these kind of presentations and somebody comes in and says, all right, here's the recipe. Here's what you do when you get into a drought. I don't think there's anything, I've spent most of my adult life in a drought with 3 record rainfall years. I don't know that there's, in all those years, I don't know if there's something I would have done twice the same way. Market conditions affect your decision. How bad the drought is affects your decision. When you're making the decision has an effect. And so we've got to take all those things into account. The good news about drought is if you define it as an unanticipated shortfall in precipitation that affects the amount of forage available to livestock, there's 2 ways to fix that. If we can anticipate the shortfalls, we're not in a drought. If we can adjust things so that we've got something for livestock to eat, we're not in a drought. The reason I'm standing here talking about range stuff today, I was an ag ed major at Tarleton about 40 years ago. The range professor that I had was an old rancher from Dublin, Texas. The first day we were there, he came in. I was taking this class because you had to have some agronomy credits, and I didn't want anything to do with a tractor. And I thought, well, there's cows going to be involved, so it can't be all bad. The first day we were there, he said, the most money I ever made in the livestock business was in 1953. And my ears perked up, and he had my attention. because my dad had told 1953 stories since I was this tall. And he went on to say, the reason I made so much money was I sat in the sale barn in Dublin, Texas, and they would run in a ring full of number one Hereford bull calves, and he said the auctioneer would look up at me, and if I raised my hand, I bought them, and if I didn't, they had to take them back home and keep feeding them. And he said, I had grass and nobody else did, and that put me in the driver's seat. This is a little grass. This was down around the Jornada experimental range. So a little bit drier country than we're in. They basically went over this period of years. These are the data points, and they looked at the peak standing crop of forage compared to rainfall. And they fitted that line to it. Now those are actually fairly close to that line. But you can see for a given rainfall, there's quite a little slop in these numbers. Why is that?
The previous years, probably.
Previous year has something to do with it. Our potential for production next year is being determined right about now. The buds that are going to become new grass tillers are formed right now. The number of those that survive the winter determines how good it can be next year. And then how much rain comes next year affects how many of those tillers actually become grass. So that's part of it. What else? Timing. If all the rain comes during the dormant season, we're probably not getting as much good out of it as if it comes during the growing season. And what we'll see also is when during the growing season it comes has a big effect on how much is produced as a result. But by and large, we know. Now, the other thing to notice, just to not have a bunch of it die, we got to have about 4 1/4 inches. If we get less than that, we got stuff going away. I used to tell people, you can't drought out blue grandma. I don't tell people that anymore, because I was in southeast Colorado in 2002 and 2011. 2002 was the driest year on record until 2011. 2011, there were areas the length of this table around, there was not a living perennial grass plant. We got 3 1/4 inches over about 15 months. So it can get tough. So why is that not closer? Optimum temperatures for cool season grasses and warm season grasses are different. Cool season grasses, about 60 to 75-ish. For warm season grasses, 75 to 90. If you're talking about tropical forages like Bermuda grass, hotter's better, assuming you got the water. If we have some diversity of species, whenever we get rainfall, something grows. If all we've got is buffalo grass, if you get rainfall in May, June, July, it's going to be Fat City. If you get it some other time, you got problems. And so having that diversity can help us. The other thing is evapotranspiration losses are higher as we get into the hotter part of the year. The other thing that can have an effect is the amount and intensity of rainfall, antecedent rainfall. I worked with a guy who was a legend, Dr. Bobby Stewart. And I used to talk about, well, effective rainfall. He said, it's all effective. He said, even if you don't get any growth, that's that much less that didn't evaporate down past the permanent wilting point. Y'all are in a good position here because you have a lot of coarse textured soils. That gets water in the ground a little better. It gets water deeper in, a given amount of water gets deeper into the profile, and a sandy soil can give up water a lot longer than a clay soil will. When a clay soil is at permanent wilting point, there's still more water in the profile than there is when a sand is at field capacity. But that water in that clay can go away too. And if that happens, we got to get enough rainfall to get back to permanent wilting point before any more rainfall is going to do us any good. How much, we can't do anything about how much rain falls, but we can do a whole lot about how much gets absorbed, and probably more importantly, how little evaporates out. And we do that by maintaining cover. And then the previous years, the history that Janet was talking about. This is straight off of a NRCS ecological site description for this area. This is how much, the proportion of the annual production produced in each month of the year, assuming that you've got that variety of different species. And then the blue line is how much rain falls in each of those months. From here to here, those track pretty close, right? From here to here, not so much. Now, Jason, earlier this morning, was talking about, well, you know, it looked pretty grim, but then we started getting rainfall this fall or this late summer, and things got a lot better, and they have. But don't be fooled by how high the seed heads are sticking up. That is not how much grass you've got. That's how tall the seed heads are. Go out there and look, and my guess is compared to normal. I'm not sure what normal is anymore, but normal. You don't have leaves coming all the way up those stems. What happens, most of our warm season grasses, they start getting ready to put up a head as the days start getting shorter. That's the end of June. Before that, you're making a lot of foliage. After that, you get rainfall, it's going to want to put up that seed head. When that seed head goes up, we don't make no more new tillers. We don't make a whole lot more foliage. We produce enough foliage to put that seed head up. The other thing that does is we've got a lot more stem compared to leaf than normal. Stems are not going to be as high quality as leaves. If we don't get rain in here, it's going to have to be really dynamite for us to produce as much foliage, as much forage even, with rainfall out in here. because it's starting to mature already and because we've got higher evaporative losses. So just how much rain we get doesn't tell us the full story. This was September of last year, drought monitor, and Justin talked about this a little earlier. Dang it. Dang it.
Well, go back to that precipitation one. Did you see where that August one you were down and that was kind of amazing that August would grow more pounds of forage even though the precipitation was down right there. See that bump in the August and down on the other one?
No, this
That's
is
the monthly average
this is
precipitation.
more water.
Yeah, okay.
This is less grass.
Exactly. It wouldn't
We got the second highest moisture in August.
Yeah,
Normally,
right.
we don't
Yeah,
produce
I
that
just
much
thought that-
grass in
The
August.
difference was amazing.
You have two different grass growth curves here. You have a normal grass growth curve where you have 70% of your vegetation there on that first peak and the 30% on that second peak. In a desert grass growth curve, you will see that, in other words, if it's late rainfall that comes in like we do a lot of times, we don't get it early, then you'll have your bulk, which is about 60% of normal on the, what I call a desert grass growth curve.
If that's what the system is used to. Roswell, New Mexico,
Yeah.
their peak is right in here.
Yeah, that's your desert grass.
And that's when it's used to growing.
Right.
They're still not, in Roswell, New Mexico, you're looking at 12, 13 inches of rainfall normally. Their 12 inches of rainfall ain't gonna do as much good still as if we get 12 inches of rainfall in here and it gets dry
Right.
because of that evaporative loss. This only works if we've got some cool season grasses too. If we've got nothing but buffalo grass and blue grama, this goes away, this goes away. This is maybe not gone away, but it's this tall. And so we get some issues. So what you have growing, what you have available is going to determine whether this works or not. You get off the Cap Rock where they have can have a lot of Texas wintergrass. Rainfall here actually can do a fair bit of good. If you're here, you've got a lot of western wheatgrass and needling thread. This can actually do you a little more good than this would indicate. So the diversity can help you. This I thought, I tried this yesterday. I had kind of what Justin had, only I had it animating up. But basically he already stole my thunder, so it's not that important that I just screwed this up. Basically, y'all are in a lot better shape than most in the Panhandle. They were talking about the western side, that's me. If it hadn't have been for October of last year and August of this year, I wouldn't have grown anything in 2 years. I mean, wouldn't have grown anything in 2 years. So we've got to start being prepared for that. I spent most of the last 20 years, actually most of the last 30 years in eastern Colorado. They've been in a drought since 2000. They had 2 wet years. since I've been here, at least where I live, I've had one record rainfall year, and I've been in a drought the rest of the time.
Can we ship you back?
But we need to ship me back and forth, because it seems like everywhere I move to, right after I get there, it gets great. And then it gets really bad.
It is interesting how eastern Colorado, I've heard that it's really green up there, and then New Mexico, you know, parts of New Mexico.
New Mexico looks like,
Looks like-
all the parts I've seen look like death eating a ham
Okay,
sandwich.
well, see, Colorado there looks a lot better.
Well, this was a year ago.
Oh, it says September 6th,
Yeah.
22.
Oh, wait, okay, yeah.
Oh, well,
I've talked to friends up there.
yeah.
I use these maps, but I'm telling you, you don't go from a D4 drought to abnormally dry in 3 weeks.
Right.
They're looking at how much water fell out of the sky. If we define drought like I had up there originally, you don't get out of a drought in 3 weeks.
Right.
You get out of a drought over a couple of years. And so, like I say, I use these maps. I'm not real keen on them necessarily. If we look at historical rainfalls, what you will find, if you want to make money, go to the coffee shop and tell everybody there, I'll put my money against anything you want to put up. We pay off the last day of the month every month. I'm betting it's going to be drier than average. Who wants to come on? You're going to win. Most of the time, I mean, you're going to win more often than you will not. Median rainfall, the amount that you get half the years better and half the years worse, is always below average. And the reason is we have months, we have years. I mean, 2015 we had 35 inches of rainfall. So you average that in with 3. On average, that's this much, but we have a whole lot more of them this side of that than we do this side of that. I put these quartiles up here, and I don't, somehow or another, these were not like that. If we get a year where we're getting this much rain, any idiot can do well, right? If we get years where we got that kind of rainfall, you know what the difference between a good manager and a bad manager is?
Sailboat.
About two inches. That middle part, that's where the managers get separated out. That middle half of the data. You look here, that's the odds of having less than average by month. Now if you look at that, the money month is May. I've been here 9 years. I'm starting my 10th. Now, I grew up in Lubbock County. In the 9 years I've been back in the Panhandle, we have had 1 year that we had a good May. And that's supposed to be the money month. Most of the years where I'm living, we haven't really had much rainfall till around here, and quite often till around here. The patterns seem to be changing. We're starting to go to more of the desert grassland kind of patterns. Yes, sir.
So why do they call May the money month?
That number is littler than any of these numbers. And if you look at the odds of being in that upper part of the middle quartile versus the bottom part of the middle quartile, even May, you're 50% more likely to be below average. And there's some of these, I mean, how do you dig this or this? Point being, looking at those growth curves, looking at when we're likely to get good rainfall. If we ain't got something happening by about the end of June, first part of July, odds are things ain't going to be all that spectacular. Now, do we get wet years? Sure. Do we get wet late summer and fall? Sure. But guys that go to Vegas and make their money at a poker table, they don't make their money knowing, I know what card is fixing to be turned up. They make their money knowing what's the odds that that guy is going to fill the hand that he's playing there versus what are the odds that I'm going to fill mine. And they bet accordingly. Betting that you're going to have an above average September, you're not going to collect on that bet very often. We've had a decent late August and coming into September. We're kind of setting up. Now, if we've got good grass, we're setting up for a decent year next year. If we've got a weak open stand of grass, we're setting ourselves up for a great annual broomweed or little barley or cheatgrass kind of a year. How we're managing that cover, how we're managing the vigor of the grass, that's going to tell us what can we expect for next year. Were you? Yes, sir.
Yeah. So where are we at in the drought cycle? I always understood there's 2 30-year cycles within a 60-year cycle. And maybe that's just lifestyle, I don't know, but where are we in the cycle?
That's a Bledsoe question.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure. On the radio the other morning, they were saying, now not necessarily right at this particular spot, but the western United States right now is in the longest, most severe drought we've had since 1200.
1,200?
Yeah.
And they know that by?
Tree ring data, pond sediments, that kind of stuff. I read a research paper where they looked at those things for the past 2,000 years. What they said, I mean, y'all stay away from tall buildings. Don't get in your garage with a running vehicle because you're going to be tempted to close the door and sit there for a while after I tell. If you are prone to depression, stop listening to me for about the next minute and a half. What they said in this research paper was the first 1,000 years of that 2,000 years was much drier than the 1,000 years since. They said the drought of the 30s and the 50s was just a little dry spell during that period of time. That it was not unusual to have 30 to 40 year droughts in that first 1,000 years. I'm not saying that's where we're headed. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying weather patterns seem to be changing. Those of you who have as much white in your beard or hair as I do, when I was these guys' age, in the 4 years I went to Tarleton, 3 of those years I either drove home or drove back to college on snow. 2 of those 3 I drove on snow through Christmas break. We don't have those anymore. When I was their age, in May and June, we had frontal rainfall systems move in, and everybody in the county would get an inch. Now, I mean, it'd be between 0.8 and an inch too. And for several months, that's the kind of rain we got. When's the last time we had a frontal rainfall in this part of the world? Now it's all convection showers. This is a time we need to be assessing what we've got. About here, we're looking at all the grass we're going to have until about here. So this is another time we need to be looking and saying, so monitoring, Jason talked about keeping records. How many of you could tell me right now how much rain you've had in the last 12 months?
David Cook can.
Lots of people did not raise their hands. How many of you can tell me what's your cost of carrying a cow normally? Daily. 1. That's not a fabulous. If you're going to make a drought decision, you need to know how much does it cost me to carry a cow, to carry a replacement heifer, to carry a stocker over this period of time. If you don't, then you don't know which class of cattle you need to sell. In a drought, it's easy to get depressed. If you're like me, it's easy to get depressed anyways. But in a drought, you can sit and wring your hands and say, oh, woe is me, I hope it rains. Hoping for rain, even praying for rain, that is not a drought management strategy. You need to look at what can you control and do something about it.
Grazing practices is one of your biggest things that you can do, because if you go in early and you cut off over 50% of the leaf surface, that plant's going to sit there for anywhere from 30 to 60 days before it grows again.
If conditions are good.
You can have the best conditions there is, and they still won't.
Yeah.
If you go and strip too much leaf surface.
If conditions aren't good, it may be a year or two.
I think you have a blueprint for desertification working.
Absolutely. How we manage residual cover, how we manage the frequency and intensity of that defoliation determines how soon it's going to get regrowth, how well the grasses respond, how much rainfall we're going to actually get in the ground, how much evaporative loss we're going to have of what comes in. I took a bunch of students 2 weeks ago up near Dumas to a place that I use a lot. This guy's a really great grazing manager. We drove past a place, and I'm not calling any names, but I drove past a place that I've been driving past for the last 32 years. When I was going back and forth from home to CSU, I drove past that place every time. And for 32 years, good years, bad years, it always looks the same. You could throw a snuff can, you could be Nolan Ryan and throw a snuff can out in that pasture and you could not hide it. Many of our droughts are self-induced. How many people do you know that, you can drive across the country, and I challenge everybody here to do this. Do a little what I call windshield ecology. You're driving down the road and you look and there's a fence line here, and on this side you got grass and some pretty forbs and fat cattle, and on this side you got can't hide a snuff can. And ask yourself, what's going on there? And I am telling a true story. We were doing this with a guy who was running on a grazing association north of Fort Collins. And there was a fence line contrast like that. And my boss, who had basically my job now up there, asked the guy, what do you think's going on there? If I'm lying, I'm dying. He said, they get a little more rain on that side of the fence. And actually, effectively, they did. Because they were managing cover better. One thing we can control, at least to an extent, is drinking water. This gentleman said, you need to be given some recovery. You need to be not taking that grass so tight. One way we can increase recovery periods is to be able to combine herds and put them in one pasture and give more pastures a break at a time. But if we're going to do that, we got to have enough water where if they need to get a drink, they can go get one and go back and eat. If all we've got is windmills and little bitty water troughs, we can't combine those herds. So we got to get that right. Livestock numbers, those timely changes in stocking rate. Residual cover. If you want to, I've in 2002 and in 2011, I had some friends in southeast Colorado, fabulous grazing managers. In 2002 and 2011, they had a neighbor. He was a guy who did not believe in wasting any grass. He had a cow to guard every plant. And we were out in late 2002, and they said, we've been trying to do a good job. We've been managing residual cover. We've been changing our stocking rate. We've shipped cows off, and our place looks just like his, and we're kind of wondering, why are we doing this? And I said, because it's what you need to be doing. And I said, I think it'll get better. It started raining in about 2004. Their place bounced back. Neighbor looked just like it had been. And they said, now we know. This is why. It's still going to get bad in a drought. But it'll get better faster if you're taking care of this. Recovery periods got to get longer. Okay. You can recall your response, your attitude. If you're doing these things, you can feel better about how things are going. Get that cover, get water in the ground, and keep it there. To do that, you need to have a stocking rate that approaches what your carrying capacity is. You have to leave a pasture while there's enough residual there. This means you can't wait till it's gone to do this. Think of that as a hay barn. You got a full hay barn, you can run a few animals for a long time, or you can run a lot of animals for a short time. You can't run a lot of animals for a long time. And then opportunities for regrowth. If it ain't raining, you haven't given it an opportunity to regrow. Just because you're gone don't mean you've given the grass some recovery. It's got to regrow back. In a good wet period, that may be 60 days. In a drought, that may be 2 years. Maybe a little more than that. That's why we got to manage cover. You get more water in, and you got access to more water. Optimum residual, to me, that is subpar. And we got lots of bare dirt showing. That's more on short grass country. I want to not be able to look down and see dirt. If you can do that with grass this tall, that's fine. If you got to get grass this tall, that's what you need to have. The problem with trying to feed through a drought is you don't know how long it's going to last. And if you're feeding cows on pasture, they're not just going to eat the hay. They're going to be going out and looking around to see, has something else grown? They're taking away the opportunity for that grass to recover and to grow more cover. That's going to have a long-term detrimental effect on the forage resource. Now, will it recover? Yeah, eventually. This ain't the first time. The first 1,000 years were drier than the 1,000 years now. But that's in geologic time, not banker time. And you only got banker time. How much are you making per head right now? How many calves does the average cow have in her lifetime? And I gotta hurry, Andy's over here doing. And how many calves have you got left in that cow? Question, how many calves will the average cow have in her lifetime? Yeah, y'all cheated, because y'all.
That's all right.
And I used to tell people that, and they would say, oh, no, my cows will have 8 or 10. And everybody's got cows that have had 8 or 10. But it is a mathematical fact. This is taking 100 bred heifers, 95% breed, and 95% of those wean a calf. no death loss, no bad bags, no cripples, nothing else. All you're doing is culling the opens and the dries. Average cow, 6 1/4 calf. Keep a heifer back, 5 1/4. And that's with no other reason to cull. And when is a female bovine most likely not to breed back?
Second gen.
So if we take out more here, this is an optimistic number. You go to 90 and 90, that drops to about 4. So you got basically 3 to 4 calves to get your money back out of that cow. If you start feeding her to get her through a drought, how much money are you making on a calf? $150? What's hay bringing right now? I can tell you because I bought some for my recreational sheep. $150 to $200 a ton. So you feed an extra ton of hay, that calf, you made 0 on him. Now you got 1 less calf to get your money back out of the cow. Now, here, you could get 3 more calves apiece out of these 12-year-old cows, but I doubt it. That's with 90 and 90. That's above the average for the United States. If you can feed your way out of a drought, I would say put them in a yard and feed them. It'll cost you less for the feed, you'll have less wastage, and you're not hurting the pastures. If you can't afford to put them in the pen, probably ain't time to be feeding. The other thing is, think about the depreciation on those cows. This can help you determine what class is overpriced, and every day there is a class of cattle that is overpriced, there's a class of cattle that's underpriced. You want to maintain numbers through a drought? I can run more little cows than I can big cows. And by cows, I'm using generic. If I can keep lots of heifers, I can maintain more head. Now, I may have to do more supplementation of quality, hopefully not forage, and I can maintain those numbers. These cattle are depreciating. Do you want to have an appreciating asset or a depreciating asset? If I can manage my inventory so that I have lots of these and very few of these, it makes it easier to figure out, what do I do? If I'm not spending much money on these normally, I can make money on these cattle easy. We need to have some class of cattle that we can get rid of on short notice with drought and have a reasonable chance of getting our money back out of them. Keeping lots of heifers. The good part about heifers over steers, steers are a perishable commodity. Heifers, I can keep them and breed them. I can keep them and calve them out. I can right? So to prepare, maximum potential grass production is decided this year, for next year. How much is left is determined by conditions this winter and spring. Open stands of grass are asking for weed invasion. Can you spray them? Sure. It's going to cost you $30 to $40 an acre. How much are you getting out of an acre of grass? And I would wager to say your net less than $5 an acre. So you're 8 years paying for that spray, assuming you don't get any more weeds. Keeping them out will cost you less normally. Fewer defoliations in a season. Remember, quite often, and this is why I don't think we're out of a drought, droughts often are broken by a big rainfall event. We ain't had them. Especially a big geographic region, all over rainfall event. When that comes, you ain't got no cover, you're going to lose soil, you're going to get less water in the ground, and you're in trouble. You need to be in shape to capitalize on that rainfall. Recovering, it don't take long for a cow to eat her head off. We've talked about that. Abused resources are going to cause us issues. There's not. Average cow produces 4 calves in her lifetime. How long is the cattle cycle normally? 10 years from peak to peak, valley to valley. If I'm buying $4,000 heifers, like they're predicting, I'm going to be selling at the bottom of the market. The depreciation on those cows, or the likelihood is I'm going to be selling most of those on the bottom of the market. The depreciation on those, there's nothing wrong with stocking up from the natural increase. And if you're keeping lots of young cattle, that's much quicker to do. Keeping costs low is going to make you generally more money than getting lots of premiums. Because you're spending money on every cow, you're getting a premium on part of the calves. Keeping those inventories in line is a big deal. You got 3 inventories: cash, grass, and cattle. How many people have ever had too much cash? Certainly not me. How many people have had too much grass? How many people get stuck with too many cattle in a drought? And keep this in mind. I know, it's a great thing to think about how good the cattle market's going to get. But the price of cattle going up or down is only relative to how much does it cost you to keep them. I've seen more people go broke hanging on to irreplaceable genetics than I have any other single factor. And I don't care how good your cows are, everybody's got a bottom end. Andy talked about grade up. If you've got extra grass right now, I would be buying as fancy a heifers as I can find and sell cull cows, older cows to get them. I can run more and they will appreciate it. You're going to have infrastructure that allows these shorter graze periods and longer recovery periods. More paddocks helps you. Better water helps you. Being able to gather cattle easily helps you. Managing those 3 inventories, being able to gather when you need to, some parting thoughts. And I had some others that I took notes on, but if you don't change direction, you're going to end up where you're headed. If you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. If you're overstocked now, you ain't going to fix it hanging on to cattle. Lots of people, and I've been there, will sit there going, I wonder if it does this, then I'm going to make a mistake. And you get paralyzed with indecision. Generally, that's going to be worse than make a decision. Even if it's wrong, you can fix it. You'll feel better about it. Even if you make that mistake, you can recover. And when there's blood in the streets, opportunities abound. If you have grass, somebody's got livestock that they can put on it. My friends in southeast Colorado that said they didn't know why they were doing it, but then they figured it out. In 2003, they had sent some cattle to other pasture in 2002. They had grass in 2003. They weren't sure they were going to be out of the drought, so they didn't go bring their own cattle back. They knew people in the mountains. Those mountain ranchers spend 6 months a year putting up hay and 6 months a year feeding hay. They were looking for somewhere to go winter cows. Now, remember, this was in 2003. They talked to some of their friends, and they knew how much grass they had. They knew how many cattle they could run from November to May. They called some of their friends and they said, I can take this many cows, $30 a month, we'll care for them. If you want to feed them anything, you buy the feed. You got to come get them 1st of May. So they got 6 months at $30 a month in 2003 to run those cows. No risk, no money invested. I said, Kelly, you're making more money than they are. And you're taking no risk. I said, why don't you just do that every year? They said, well, we like our cows. But that is an opportunity that you could take advantage of.